Greetings. Welcome to Extra Hours, part of the Office Hours.global network. You can check out how all that works, officehours.global/join. And you'll see that we do a daily show at 7 a.m. Pacific. And then here we are on Monday evenings at 6 p.m. Pacific, doing Extra Hours, a little different than the daily show. A few less, often a bit of a smaller panel, and we kick around some topics for a little bit longer. And so kind of like office hours up late in a way. So we'll see who we have on the panel today. We've pulled in a few different people. Up in Seattle, Washington, first of all, is Guy Cochrane. Hello, Guy.
Oh, hello. Excited to announce that we've got the Zoom integration going into Vector. So this is a first for the show. So let's see how she handles. Let's ride this one.
That's right. Well, and it is a reminder that, talk about this as being a different show that we do at night. And part of the reason is actually an excuse that's put on a show to mess around with the gear in the background. We're a bunch of media professionals, production, media creation technicians, all of that is who we are. And so an opportunity to play around with some cloud production is really the excuse of this show. So the if ever you think, gee, the content's not that great tonight, you might just think, oh, well, at least it was a good excuse for them to play around with Vector in the cloud. That's our excuse for poor content. So yeah, the using the Zoom integration directly into Vector, and one of the things that was straight away, and actually, let me introduce another. I should complete the panel. Let me go first to. Down the hill from me in Adelaide, South Australia, is Karl Asmussen. Hello, sir.
Good morning. It's 1st of April here, so
that's right.
Yeah,
it's but it is. Well, actually, I was going to say it's past midday. It's not, and so who knows what things we may come up with as April Fools. We'll see what happens. So thank you for being here, Karl. And then we have someone who has worked, I think, probably on every Extra Hours episode. Is that right, Taylor? Taylor has worked on everyone. Is that right? Right from the start?
Yeah, I think I've been here for. Yeah. Well, no, I take that back. It wasn't everyone. There were a few that Kevin did, and then I took over for Kevin, and then we went from there. So.
Oh, that's true. Okay. Yes. Yeah. There's a couple there,
but still, it feels like everyone. Let's put it that way.
Well, and we must be pushing sort of 35, 40 episodes or something now, I think. Must be up there.
Yeah, we're on what I put 36 tonight? 35 or 36 tonight? I should know. I set up the YouTube event, but here I am second guessing myself.
It's riveting content as we sit and think about what exactly the episode number is that we're doing.
Oh, yeah.
So Taylor is switching the show as well as being on the panel, which is quite a skill.
Yeah, why not?
You were watching early This Week in Tech episodes with Leo Laporte when he used to switch his own show. He used to, with the keyboard underneath the desk, you just sit and switch your own shows. It's the same thing. And so if during the show you just see Taylor pop up randomly, it'll just be that he just wants to put himself into the show. So we'll see. If everyone else gets muted and Taylor just takes the rest of the show, we'll know why. To complete out the panel, first time on Extra Hours, I think, Jeffrey Powers. Hello, sir.
It's second time on Extra Hours.
First time with me.
First time with you. Yeah, absolutely. Okay. This is episode 35, by the way. Even though Taylor had it as 34, it's actually 35. So,
there you go.
And yeah, I am the April Fool. So thank you very much for having me on. It's a great time to be on.
So because it's the first time I've been on the show with you, I mean we've done lots of Extra Hours episodes together. But tell us a little bit about what keeps you busy. I mean, you can tell us about Geekazine, and you've been doing sort of product reviews for some time. When did that all start?
For Geekazine, well, I started back in 2007. I started as a podcast, and then in 2008, somebody challenged me and said, "Hey, if you're going to be doing this on a full-time basis, you should go to like CES and interview people." And it's like, well, okay. So 2009 was when I went to my first CES and really got into doing all this new media type stuff. And I haven't looked back, and it's been a lot of fun.
And so, is it you do this full time? Is it kind of the thing, or how does that work?
Well, yeah. Well,
Yes
I
and no.
have a couple different channels. I have Geekazine, which right there we go. And then of course me and a couple other people do a thing called Build Day Live, which is enterprise tech. So basically what happens is, and this was pre-COVID, we've been trying to figure out the new platform, but the idea was we would go into somebody's enterprise and put an appliance in, like a storage appliance or a networking appliance, and then we would configure it and we would show people on a live stream, which was great. And like I said, we've been retooling it since COVID started, because there's still companies that aren't fully back to work. So it makes it a little bit difficult. So we've been doing some virtual stuff as well. But between that and just doing some extra stuff, I'm also a musician, so I play in a couple bands. So that hobbles together the dimes and nickels.
Fair enough. When did you join Office Hours? What was the first? You were pretty early on, right?
It was either April or May. It wasn't the first one, that was for sure. I remember seeing, I think it was Shannon Morse on Facebook. I can't remember 100%, but I think it was her that said, "Hey, you know, Alex is doing something," and then I just like, okay, well, I got some time, so jumped on, and that was pretty much it. And yeah, so I've been doing that for Office Hours. Plus, I've been taking care of the YouTube, one of the managers of YouTube, but I've been doing it probably the longest out of all of them. So
yeah, and so you would. I remember you were sort of looking after getting all the questions, chapter data, and all of that sort of stuff in there, right? You still do that, or it's...
Actually, no. I handed it off to somebody else, but back in that day, that was a different beast altogether, because we didn't have Makana, we didn't have anything. So when questions came in, we had to organize them, and so I created this spreadsheet, and I found this. Somebody made something very similar that I could adapt to. So basically, when Alex said next question, I hit a button in the spreadsheet, and it would take the question and move it over to the and put a timestamp on it. And so that was how we first did all the timestamping of the YouTube channel. and then when Makana came around, it was a lot easier to actually bake it into Makana. So from there, that's when we basically pull some scripts, and that's how the timestamps come out.
That's cool. And we'd always hit up against the character limit on the description. Is it the description field or something? And yeah. Is that still a problem today? I guess it is.
No, well, not as much, because we went from 2 hours to 1 hour. When it started at the beginning, we were not recording the second hour. We were just recording the first hour, so that made it easy. But when we decided to start doing the second hours on YouTube, then it was, we had to do half of it in the description, and then once we hit the character limit, we ended up putting the rest in like a comment afterwards. And then I experimented a little bit, and then we ended up just doing the second hour questions. And but now that it's just 1 hour, we're back to the 1 hour and those questions.
Yeah. Okay. So we've got NAB next week. Have you done, Jeffrey, have you been to NAB and sort of done coverage of NAB before?
Oh yeah, I've been going to NAB almost. Well, it would have been my 12th year, but I am actually not going this year. I'm going to be in Houston for an event over at HPE campus, Hewlett Packard Enterprise.
Okay, right. Wow. And have you done live streams at all from NAB?
Yes.
Yeah, you did. Yeah. How did you do that?
We've done. First of all, what we did, I worked with a couple people, Todd Cochrane and Andy McCaskey, back in 2008, 2009. We finagled our way onto NBC Universal's booth at CES, and we did a 1-hour live stream. And we said, we've got to do this ourselves. So then we went to the CEA. Consumer Electronics Association, and we said, hey, we would like a booth. And so then the next year, which was 2011, I believe, that's when we did our first, 2010 or 2011, that's when we did our first live stream from there. We did that for a few years, and then I went back and forth doing the solo to that. Mm-hmm. Then live stream, usually a lot of live stream, it's tough because you can't get a good signal anywhere. Mm-hmm. So the best thing to do, what I was doing for a while, was I was recording the interviews and then going out to the parking lot area and then hitting the play button. So nobody really noticed the difference, and it was really like a 10-15 minute difference.
That makes sense. Yeah, I mean, if there's not that much interaction anyway, then it would work fine. So
exactly.
So, Guy, have you got off the fence yet? Are you going to NAB?
I would have booked by now. It doesn't look like I'm going to be heading there this year. I was trying to make a last-ditch effort and finagle something, but it looks like it's a no-go. So,
all right.
Unless something changes.
I was talking to 1F Jeff today about how we can do extra hours next week, and so my plan is to have 4 people, with three other people with me in Vegas, and then hopefully you're available, Guy, and you can still be here, and Taylor will still be around to do all this stuff and make it happen, so that we can. But we can bring in, one person or one feed from Vegas with 4 of us. And you can see back there, I've got that's the Rode Podcaster. And it's running off of a battery bank at the moment, USB battery bank. So I'm just running it and seeing how long that'll last, because I think I could do this totally wirelessly. And my idea is actually just to grab a spot sort of in the lobby or foyer area outside one of the halls, and then just sit there for an hour or so. And so that's currently my plan.
That sounds like a pretty good plan.
Yeah.
I wonder who we know that might have a good connection. I know Greg Gibson's staying at a nearby hotel that is
so am I.
right by North Hall. So
I know, and I am too. I'm not all that far away. And I did think about that. I could just totally go back to the room if the connection's okay. But there was just something about being close to the hall and stuff. But I guess it just depends. If it's a blank wall behind us or something, it doesn't matter where we are. So,
well, and then Alex mentioned that Keenan's loaning him his cellular bonding solution, so maybe you can tag up with those 2 and angle that. Well,
yeah, and Jeff said that he could bring he's got a PepLink and a bunch of SIM cards and stuff in it too, and so there's probably a couple of options for bandwidth. I mean, if we're doing a single Zoom call, it's not going to be too taxing. I think we'd be able to get out okay.
HD.
Okay, that's right. I'll leave that to Alex. Leave that to Alex. We'll just be talking about what we've seen. I'm also hoping to try to do some after hours stuff as well, where I'm just kind of walking the floor. And Taylor just told me that he's kind of available around that time. So we might work out a couple of time slots where we try to walk and give people the idea of of what it's like just seeing the booths. No booths necessarily in
If
detail.
only we
but-
had a Slack alert that could just like send it out, you know, when somebody's talking, that you know, it would just like alert this whole group
Wait,
of
wait,
people.
wait.
There's everyone.
Wait, what is the Slack business you're talking about? It's called Discord. Come on
Yeah,
now.
that's right. Yeah, I did build a little. I built a little thing into Slack because I'm constantly in Slack, and so I build a little thing that just tells me when people are talking in after hours.
I think you
which
need
is
to
kinda
release that.
handy.
I think you need to unleash that. There was a question on Sunday. How do we rejuvenate
Yeah, I
after
heard that.
hours? And that would definitely get some people alerted to who's talking,
Well,
because we don't.
Wait, you built, Grant, you built this, you built a thing in Slack that tells you when somebody's talking?
Yeah,
Oh, wow.
yeah. I mean,
That's interesting.
It's basically. I mean, it's just using Zoom OSC, but it just knows when people start talking, whoever the active speaker is, it'll say that, you know, Guy Cochrane is talking, and then it just kind of it tracks it so that because otherwise it would continue every time it goes, it would then go Taylor, and then it'd go Guy Taylor, and you just be getting slammed with it. But instead it just keeps a little array, and if it's within the last half an hour, it only says it once, and so every half hour it will say again, oh, Guy is talking. You know, if he's been talking for an hour or something, it does that. So
I thought Discord
But it
had
was
a bot.
originally developed for something else, but works well for
That's it.
after hours. Yeah.
It does. So the other thing that I've done is that I was talking to Andy about this, that when Andy added the transcription option in OSC, now you can actually get what people are saying as well. And so I have thought about sort of having a little buffer where you capture what people are saying for, you know, 15 seconds, send that to ChatGPT and get it to do a summary, and then post that. And so then it would all be automatic that just says, this is what people are saying. So I'm sure.
So
Yeah, go.
everything I say in after hours is going to be on the record. Is that what you're telling me?
Exactly. And that's the thing. I think Alex would have some things to say about some of these things. So I'm strictly talking technically, not necessarily whether it's the right thing to be doing at the moment or not. But it's cool. We have used it. I have used that on an event that Guy and I were working on, and we had a green room where the client was in, and whenever they started speaking, we would get alerts on our, you know, Slack channels that would say that, you know, they're talking, and then it would actually say what they're saying, and it would just keep posting what they're talking about. So it's pretty cool.
It's actually pretty slick, because if
events.
we wanted to step away for a minute and the client was in the lobby and they started talking and saying, hey, is there anybody here? Even if we were somewhere else, we would get the alert in Slack on our phone and be able to just immediately go back and answer their request, or whatever, their request, whatever it was. But it was very slick. I appreciated having that for sure, because the worst is for the client. And this was a multi-day, 3-day, 12-hour event. So it's like, you know, you don't want to just be sitting in front of the computer the whole time. If you need to step away for a minute, then it's nice to still be able to have an alert that lets you know. So I think we should get it in there into after hours if we can. That I'll host it if you. Yeah.
Yeah.
You need
John
a
Wallace
machine.
is saying that this is built already, built for Zoom already. Simon did it, so he must have some similar thing.
They've got one that's just in Discord, but then you have to sign up for that alert. Well, you'd have to sign up for the Slack too, but it doesn't tell you who's talking. One of us manually has to go in there and do the Simon one and say, you know, Taylor showing vector right now. Yeah, so it's
right.
And you can see it's not very active.
Maybe, yeah. And look, I mean, I think we would totally do it in Discord. There's no reason why it couldn't be in Discord. The same type of thing with webhooks, and that you just push it directly into Discord would be
Doesn't
cool.
it defeat the purpose, because it would just be chatter just the whole time versus
No. I mean, I think we still do summary based things. And even the one that I've got that just says this person's talking at the moment. I tell you where it has been really handy is when someone jumps on and says, you know, like they want to test something. And so at the moment in after hours, there might be, you know, 10, 15 people that all have their cameras off that are kind of are there, and they may or may not be listening at that exact moment. And so someone will jump in and they're like, hey, you know, anyone there? I just want to test something. Well, I would get a notification straight away, you know, and so then it was like, oh, yeah, I can go over there if I wasn't listening to it at the time. So someone built an automated one to track who is speaking and what is going on in breakout rooms. Okay. Wasn't ever released. There you go. The things you learn when we start asking the questions. Well, I think it's worth exploring that, because I did listen to that conversation on Sunday. That was just like, well, what are we going to, how are we going to reinvigorate after hours? And the idea of limiting it to certain times, I don't necessarily think is the idea, particularly for us in different time zones. But knowing when some things are happening, so having some planned events, I think could be good. But
yeah, so we'll having show and tells, having little labs, just to have to be kind of scheduled and at least 24 hours notice, kind of thing. But you can do many different kind of things, but you just need to give people 24 hours notice. So as people in different time zones can join, and don't make them any longer than, I don't know, 2 hours would be the absolute maximum length you want anything to go for like that. But generally half an hour to an hour would be all right for show and tell. Or, hey, I got a new Blackmagic camera. Let's, you know, whoever's got one, or I'm just going to go through all the settings and I'm going to sit in a studio and show you all the settings, that kind of stuff, that kind of show and tell. Or, you know, labs. We've done labs in the past. Where people have gotten on and done, you know, Raspberry Pi kind of things, and so they're kind of good. But you just need to announce them 24 hours before. Yeah, you just need to announce them so people know, rather than just jumping on and say, "Hey," because it just gives people time.
Yeah. We've got a few questions here. So, Guy, what's our first one there?
First one's in from Robert Green, and he in Los Angeles, California. And he asks, new PTZ camera coming from Blackmagic this week? ?
April Fools? Karl?
There's a likelihood of this. I think there's a coin toss in this, 50-50 chance that some form of PTZ, be it a PTZ base for their micro, or a PTZ camera, or both. You know, they could do a PTZ base and a PTZ camera. So I think there's a likelihood of this, and I'm looking at the image they put up with their countdown clock. So people just go, that's a generic image. No, these images always relate back. If you actually always remember these images, they always relate back to what they talk about. So if you just remember any other past announcements. The interesting thing I'm thinking about is PTZ camera, like that has like essentially the body of a micro on it. That's HDMI capable. So if you think like a little podcast studios, which like every Tom, Dick and Harry now is doing a little podcast from a little studio where you don't need long SDI runs, you can actually just use an A10 Mini or an A10 Mini Extreme. But if you can have PTZ control, and it'll be controlled via the software, so the A10 software, obviously, or they could have an add-on because it can be networked. So they can have an add-on if they want to do that. A hardware add-on, so which you just put into a daisy chain on the Ethernet. And they simply, you can control a PTZ camera or a PTZ base, however they choose to do it, but via HDMI. So you can use an HDMI A10 Mini, and because it's simply just a command, you know, it'll be proprietary, of course. So it'll be proprietary command, which is all the Blackmagic cameras have this with their HDMI connection, as far as the HDMI versions of their cameras and the HDMI switches, which are the A10 Minis. So it'd be really interesting if they have HDMI control PTZ control via HDMI for small podcast studios. And that's because that's exactly where it originally, so people remember before COVID, the A10 was really for people who are doing online gaming and small podcast studios. That's kind of where they're marketing. If you go look at the marketing back in 2019, that's what it was for the OG A10 Mini that didn't have streaming built in or anything like that. So that's my prediction. There's a coin toss, 50-50 chance that some PTZ kind of product will be announced, whether it's a camera or whether it's just a base that will work with their current cameras. And then my guess is they'll expand 2110 in some way as well.
2110 A10 Mini.
That's already, they've already said they're doing that. So the 4K8 they already announced, when they announced their last 2110, they said that those kind of features will come to the 4K8, but they haven't implemented it yet. Well, they said they may come to the 4K8. So that was an interesting announcement they had in their last announcement they had for 2110. The 4K8 can do it because it has, well, all the features in the 4K8 can do it. They just haven't switched it on. At the moment, they're doing SRT. So the 4K8 right now can do SRT, just not 2110.
Jeffrey?
First of all, Karl, I'm surprised you didn't say PTZ. So, I was throwing me off for a second. I totally agree in what he said. I don't think that Blackmagic is going to make a full PTZ camera. They might have an enclosure. They might recommend another product to turn a Blackmagic camera like an Ursa or anything like that into something that has some sort of remote ability to it. But making their own PTZ camera, I think it. You know, I see so many PTZ cameras come across my desk, and the biggest problem with PTZ cameras is when you try to control it and you try, you know, like there's a camera I'm looking at right now. Every time I hit the up button, it jumps. It doesn't do incremental. It just boom, just like that. And so a lot of these PTZ cameras have really bad servos inside of them, and some of them you just tolerate, and some of them it's like I just can't work with that anymore. And the other thing is, you know, you turn it all the way to turtle speed, and then you hit the button and it might zoom in at turtle speed, but it will jump if you go left or right or up or down. Panasonic is probably one of the best when it comes to the internals of the servos or the motors. Then, but some of these other ones, they're just, like I said, they're just junk, and you have to really work on positioning them before you even get them on screen, or else they're gonna mess you up.
Yeah, there's I've got a couple of bird dogs, a few bird dogs, and there's a P200 I bought years ago. And the interesting thing is just being able to play now with, you might be able to make it out in the background there. I've got a control surface, one of the little 1ME control surfaces. And now the joystick on that you can use to control the PTZ, and it works really well. And surprisingly, when you have a good joystick like that, and the protocols there working nicely, you can get a really fine, smooth move on it, which I'm playing around with a little bit more to see. But apparently they also, Bird Dog did a firmware update the last couple of months that they said has actually added more finer control, which is interesting too. So I'm going to see what that looks like. But the Blackmagic announcement, annoyingly, is like a couple of hours before I get on my first flight to get over to the States. So I'm not sure. I think I'll be trying to nap at that point. Yeah, I will. I will delay it. I'll watch it at the airport instead. Yeah. But Guy, I want to ask you that something I heard recently that I just hadn't thought about was the fact that Blackmagic is still a private company. And I wondered, I think that makes a huge difference in the way that it does its directions, because it's kind of like it's just Grant thinking, all right, this is what I want to do next. In your experience with all the companies that you used to work with, and just your understanding of the industry, is there many others that would be private, like such a large company that's still private? Not that you're
I can't think of any. Usually they try to, get some private equity investors or something so that they could hedge their bets, so to speak, and get more money to invest in the company and future products. But I think it's just self-funding. I think they've done well enough that they're just they're retaining their earnings. And it's so funny because I remember being at ProMax West Hollywood back in like 2000, so 25 years ago, and Grant giving me a demo of the first deck link in this little basement on, I think it was OS 9. maybe it was OS 10. But man, to see how far that guy's gone, it's just amazing. Because yeah, he was on the cover of or there was an article written about him that disclosing some of the financials, and it was like shocking that it's all just him. Yeah, it's amazing. But as far as them venturing into the PTZ market, I just don't see it. I know Karl is hot on it, but I just don't see them doing it.
50-50. I'm 50-50 with this. Yeah, I'm 50-50.
Yeah, I just there's so many other people. Well, I mean, like Sony's
and stuff
just no Sony. You know, with the FR7, they're showing that at the $10,000 price point that they can do it with the full frame sensor. That's a lot of money. I mean, Blackmagic's known for more on the low end, trying to sell to the masses, but maybe they are with the experimenting with the 17K. Maybe they are going into this foray of going super high end and seeing what happens with some of these extravagant pieces. But I just don't see them doing a PTZ, especially a cheap one. I mean, I don't think that having played with a lot of the inexpensive models that are branded by and rebranded and some of them you're like, hey, this is the same, it's just got a different housing on it. And I mean, Bird Dog in the first generation, they had Sony chips in there, but the housing was Bolin, and the NDI was theirs, and it was just like a mishmash of parts together. But I mean, right now, Canon, is doing a great job with their CRN 500, the CRN 300 as far as the software. Because that's the other piece of this is the software is super sophisticated on the big players. Panasonic's got it down. There's a reason why you see those everywhere. And then when I read in these forums about people having a rough time with some of these lower end models, I just cringe. It's heartbreaking if somebody has a misstep in a production because of software. And I don't want to point fingers, but they know who they are.
Especially if they put AI into it. That's the one thing is you turn on the AI and all of a sudden it's jumping all over the place. It's just crazy.
But that's one of the reasons why.
Don't do that.
That's one of the reasons why I thought Blackmagic would go into it, because they have Fremont. So Fremont in California is their kind of software development, so they can tap into Silicon Valley. And there's a lot of people in Fremont who would be pretty good at doing software for a PTZ, whether it would be inside of Resolve, which would be hilarious, part of their replay engine, where you could map out and do essentially what Canon's doing. So Canon teamed up with MIT. So the software that goes inside the N300, 500, 700 was developed with MIT because MIT wanted to use it themselves for all their lectures. They didn't want to have a person at the back of the room. They didn't want to have a personal controller. So if you take a look carefully at that software that goes inside the actual, of course it goes into the actual cameras. It's not an add-on like Sony's. So that's actually developed by MIT in partnership with Canon, because MIT were trying to do their own software to run their own cameras, which I believe were Sony's in the past. And then Canon simply approached them and said, we know you're doing this. How would you like to work with us, where the software would run on the system on a chip inside the camera? So therefore it's completely, and that's exactly what Canon's done. It is an extra $1,200 for the software. So it is an add-on because they've got to pay MIT, and Canon developers as well. But it is an add-on. You do get a free version. The free version is kind of limited for what we do, but it kind of shows proof of concept. So there is a free version built in if you buy one. But this is where I think Blackmagic would do it, because they do have all those people sitting in Fremont, California, who make software essentially Resolve and everything else that surrounds Resolve. So that's why I thought maybe the PTZ, because you're right, they wouldn't just be PTZ that you control from an ATEM. It would be some form of automated or motion control as well. So where you can do point A, point B, and tell it to do it. This is kind of like Eurovision. Eurovision's mapped out that way. When the song contest isn't AI, it's not following. They actually have essentially motion control on their cameras that are, nearly all of them are controlled except for the Steadicam, I believe. But yeah, that's why I think that if Blackmagic do go down that path, and they may not announce all of this day one, but I reckon it's because they have the expertise in their software development to do something like that. 50-50 still.
Mickey was saying maybe Blackmagic can work on getting their other products, like is it the Pixis? How do you say that?
The Pixis, yeah.
Pixis working reliably first, and fix it the touchscreen UI on it while they're at it. Fix that.
Well, they could release a 10G media player as well. So that was announced a year ago. It's still not out yet. So yeah, there's a few things Blackmagic could get out in the world before they do something new.
There's a few things.
The bottom line is if they're where they're making the most money, and I think they're making the most money on the cloud and getting getting all their remote systems up and running, and I think that's what we're going to see in this next iteration is more improved network and ability to have somebody in India shooting a video in California, and just that whole remote option.
That is a good question, Jeffrey. Like, where do Blackmagic make the most of their money? Because unlike we can see with Apple, we can see how much their phone makes versus the Mac versus services. We don't get to see that with Blackmagic. So it's actually a really good question. Like, where is the majority of their income or revenue coming from? Which department? So when you look on their website and the product categories, which product categories actually bring in the most? Like, you think maybe it's a high-end cinema cameras, maybe it's their broadcast cameras, because every podcast seems to be using their broadcast. Maybe it's the ATEM switches, maybe it's the deck link cards. Maybe it's a software licensing, but it just, no, I can never figure that out. It's really hard.
Yeah, I mean, recorders, even like the HyperDecks, like I can totally see where, big productions and things that might have a whole different system for their production, but when it comes to recording, they might have a whole slew of HyperDecks, Yeah, that is interesting. I don't know what it'll be. Maybe we'll just ask them. I'm sure they'll tell us.
Yeah, well, you'll be there, so just ask. Just say, hey, my name's Grant. Hey, Grant,
they love answering questions like that.
Can you just point on the website which product category up the top there? Which one makes you the most
sure
sensible?
After hours when you do that, and Slack's running, so we get an alert that just tells us, Grant is talking with Grant right now.
That's right.
Last year we had a good conversation with Grant, and we did ask him a few questions. He gave us some really formulaic answers, but yeah, I don't know if he'll be there this year or not, but he was there last year, and so we got to meet him.
We'll find out it's a Intel scanner. That's the thing. I know it's Intel scanners where we make all our money from.
Yeah, that's where all the money is. I do appreciate that you are all calling him Grant when actually I'm sure that he would be Grant. Everyone would call him Grant. It's weird. It's a South Australian thing, and so that it's like a British South Australian thing of Grant, whereas everywhere else in Australia pretty much is Grant. And so when I lived out of Adelaide, I lived in LA, of course, I just got used to everyone calling me Grant. But Mum and Dad call me Grant, so that's what happens. So now we're calling Grant from Blackmagic. He gets that as well. Well done. Next question there. It's a little one for Guy.
Next one's coming in from Oliver Breidenbach, and he asks, what is Guy doing with a cell tower?
Well, Guy, what are you doing with a cell tower?
Evidently, what goes on Facebook goes on extra hours. So a few minutes ago, right before the show, my son pulled up with this monstrosity, which
what?
Banana for scale or human for scale. Let's see.
Yeah.
There's him. So that's, the size of a human. And that's the size of this array. I mean, it's just massive. So it's getting delivered to one of his customers. You guys aren't seeing the nifty illustration that I was doing there.
Oh, there we go. Nice. Look at that.
So you can see the size of him, which is, that guy right there. Anyways, that's the cell tower that's going up to Blaine tomorrow morning, and it's just temporarily parked out front. So nothing too exciting. It was just a funny thing that I posted on Facebook. So I was waiting for my HOA to be like, "What are you doing? I'm gonna put this in my backyard. I got a 10 gig internet connection. Why not just share it with the rest? Make a few bucks." But
everyone will get great cell coverage in the neighborhood. It'll be great.
So win-win. Actually, it's funny because the high school is a couple hundred feet away from, maybe about 1,000 feet, and they've got three of these cell towers off the stadium lights. So I mean, there's a ton of cell towers just right next to me. Yeah, a lot of high schools do that. They'll rent out that space on top of, and so his company's just busy as it can be. He drives all over the state, sometimes over to the next state, delivering things like that almost every day. It's crazy. It's Verizon and all these big companies, T-Mobile.
Are they just like repeaters, or are they?
No,
the
full on towers
actual
upgraded
cells?
5G.
Yeah, okay,
So they're,
proper
yeah, the
Right.
full on, that's what that thing was. I mean, didn't you see the picture? It's a
I know,
monster.
I know,
Like,
it's not.
look at that thing.
I wasn't thinking it was a tiny repeater. Clearly, it's the real
Yeah,
real
and that's
thing.
just what
but-
goes on the pole. They also have these monster cabinets that, you know, house all of the fiber switches and all of that. So there's another piece of that goes to complete the pieces of the puzzle.
Yeah,
Some
I was wondering what
UPS
closet you were going to
UPSs
put
as
that
well.
in.
Yeah,
It's going to go right there.
nice. We got to the bottom of it. Look at that. Oliver was onto it. Our next question.
Next one's coming in from Henry Ramos in Yonkers, New York. And he asks, anyone want to cover Bild Expo in New York City, June 18th? B&H sponsored show with lots of other vendors and discounts.
Karl, you want to go to New York, do you? You want to go
I
and
wouldn't mind
cover
going to
it?
New York, but this is something
Yeah.
they've done for quite a few years now. Essentially, it's mainly photographers, mainly New York-based photographers who come in and do their talks. Now, B&H do this all year round. They come in and do these one-hour talks that they'll put up on their B&H YouTube channel. But this is essentially an expo. So this is a combination of working professionals and exhibitors, usually manufacturers and resellers, especially in the United States. They can get together and just have this New York Expo. The reason this kind of is good is because we've lost essentially the photography expos are gone now. Don't really have any. Yeah, so well, the main one shut down in I think just before COVID, or maybe just after COVID, in Cologne, in Germany. So Photokina. So essentially, there is C+ and stuff like that, but they're kind of interesting, those kind of expos. This one is really just B&H. So this is just B&H being one of the largest photo retailers, bringing together their essentially their partners in retail and bringing in experts who they work with quite regularly, and just doing an expo. And it's online as well as in person, of course. But yeah, so this is just B&H just doing what B&H does. They used to do this kind of all year round. So used to do it like once a month. What they've done here is they're just bringing all these people together in the middle of summer and doing it in one big go. So that's the only difference of what they've used to be. They've been doing it for like 10 years, maybe even 20 years. You can go back on YouTube and watch talks that go way back 15 years or so.
Henry was just saying that it felt busier than NAB last year. Funny that Sony had a booth with cameras there where they skipped NAB New York. That is interesting.
I think B&H and B&H events like this is where the people are. So if you want to get to where the people are, the people who actually intend on buying rather than resellers, because NAB, of course, is really designed for resellers, retailers, industry professionals, rather than consumers. So if you want to talk directly to consumers and find out stuff from directly from consumers, I think this B&H one is pretty good.
Mm-hmm. Jeffrey?
Well, first of all, Henry, if you're willing to flip the bill for that, I'd absolutely go and cover that event. It's kind of expensive to do anything in New York, flight and hotel, hint, hint. But it's not surprising because, you know, I live in Madison, Wisconsin, and 15 minutes from me is another company that does audio video, Full Compass, as a national retailer, and they do monthly events all the time. They'd have, you know, they'll have somebody come in, sponsor like Roland or Soundcraft, or last year I went and I learned a little bit about I can't think of the name of the mixing board, but they had online classes. They had or not online classes. They had in-person classes. They have small groups where they bring in people and they set up tables and you can walk around just like at a regular expo. It's not as high quality, but it's also about some of these local companies that come to B&H, come to Full Compass, come to some of these other sellers and learn about the products so they can sell the products. So it's a win-win situation for everybody.
That's great. Yeah, I am interested in the different shows, and I know we've talked about sometimes when Alex has obviously gotten busier with the work that he's doing at the moment, but there is a lot of interest in covering more shows, and so I'm interested in, and this is one of the things I want to play around with, is a single single phone, single person coverage, what would that look like? Play around with that a little bit and see how doable that is. So we'll see.
Yeah, it's hard to see someone with a bigger teleprompter. We've used the Ivy in the past, which is it's pretty big, but there's something about having an FR7 inside of a robo specific prompter, like Data Video has one, and I mean. If I had all the cash in the world, I would just go ahead and build one myself. Tenacious Ventures here locally has that prompter with a UE 160 in it, and I'm always just like, oh man, if I could just put that on a cart and take that to a show with some good speakers, because then you could really see, if we had like this view of our gallery with 4 or 6 panelists from afar, it really would light up the seat, especially with a high bright monitor inside of there. Something that's that really pops on a show floor, even in bright light. But that's the dream, It's just like, because I've seen the reactions of people on those show floors when we're in a quieter environment that's not overly bright, and they can look right in that screen. I mean, I could walk away from the Ivy and people would just still be talking for 10 minutes to somebody on the other side. So it's really cool to see that dynamic. Yeah, so I would love to cover that show, but yeah, as Jeffrey said, it's kind of a pricey thing to go out there unless we get like David Brady or Henry or somebody locally to just not have to absorb that hotel and flight costs. And it's just a matter of shipping the gear. So if we had like a pool of gear that we could ship, the bummer about some of this stuff is like you can't ship the battery. The battery that we use is a big old EcoFlow, and
it was a Tesla battery, wasn't it? It's just as
it's pretty good. It's a little bigger than a car battery.
It was a power wall. Power wall that you just had on the car.
Just throw that on the backpack, right?
I don't know if you could just have a bunch of power, 20 watt, 20 kilowatt, sort of not kilowatt, 20 watt, aren't they? Is that what they are? The 100 watt, I guess it is, 98
99
watt.
99,
watt hours, that's right. That you could have just have a bunch of those that you could bring over in the plane and have a way of...
You have the V-mount, the old V-mount belts, if people remember back in the day.
That'd be fun. I have heard some planes, some airlines now that are saying that you can take them on, but you can't use them. They're like cutting down on people actually plugging their phones into charge or, that sort of stuff, which is hopefully won't be the case for me on my 14-hour flight.
That's similar to people taking sporting firearms. They're locked by TSA on one end, and when you get to the other end, and this is only domestic flights, then they're unlocked by TSA. So you can take like a case with a sporting firearm. It has to be disassembled, yada yada, and you get it all checked in, and then TSA put their own lock on it on the plane, and then it goes on. And then when you get off the plane, the TSA at the other end will take that lock off for you. So it could be the same scenario if people keep on using V-mount batteries on a plane.
Yeah, right. Next question.
Got one in from Jeffrey Powers asking, Logitech has officially discontinued Loupdeck. Discuss.
Jeffrey?
So I'll give it a little bit of context. On Friday, there was a message that came across, and of course, they put it up on their website that basically said that end of Loupdeck sales and future development plans. They will no longer be selling the Loupdeck product line and will focus on their MX Creative Console, which is this thing right here. There it is, which is basically a button system and separation button system and regular not trackball, but jog wheel. That's the word. So they're basically just getting rid of one to get the other, which I'm guessing also has a lot of the technology of Loupdeck in there as they're evolving it to a new way. Loupdeck was a closed system, and you could use the Stream Deck. A couple people were able to get Stream Deck API to work with Loupdeck, but it just had this closed system to it, and I think that Logitech wanted to figure out a new way to incorporate it and make it more user friendly for people. So a lot of the dials are gone on this new MX Creative Console. And so it's pretty interesting, but there's a lot of people that are really up in arms that were Loupdeck fans.
Yeah, I mean, it seemed like it was a very mature product, at least products. But Carl?
Yeah, so remember that Loupdeck was a separate company that Logitech bought. So it was a Finnish company that Logitech. So when Loupdeck came out, it doesn't work with any of my software. So I can't buy a Loupdeck because it's proprietary and because they made it hook into Adobe, essentially Lightroom at first. It was a Lightroom product from the original, and then they've expanded other products. Adobe has probably gone, so you can see that, I'll bring it up as well. So this is the big story here. Adobe Creative Cloud and Logitech MX, which is the MX series, is what Jeff was talking about. And so this is their new system. And this is a system that Adobe is willing to integrate into. So you've got to remember, you have to have the hooks into the software, and Adobe do not want to support a proprietary Loupdeck anymore. So obviously there's this kind of standard that, and it's their own standard that Logitech has made, the MX standard, with their Master Series. And this is only the first wave of products. We're going to see more. So some people have already seen the keyboard, which can connect to 3 different devices simultaneously. And then they've got, you got your Stream Deck kind of buttons and your shuttle. But so this is the system they're going for now. So it's not essentially like they're getting rid of everything. It's just that obviously their biggest partner, which is Adobe, says this is a standard we want to go for in the future, rather than supporting a proprietary standard from 10 years ago. So that's all that's really happened. Now, I'm sure the guys in Finland will either come over or, they've already been paid anyway. So they stayed on board, but they've already been paid because Logitech bought their company.
Fair enough. Interesting stuff. Last question.
Got one in from Taylor Sunderhaus asking, NDI is now supported in the cloud. Do you think production tools are starting to be available for cloud production?
I guess it's been supported in the cloud for a little while, but it's a big push with the Media Connect, AWS having a NDI output, right? So I think that's a pretty big change. Guy, what do you think?
Yeah, that's what the news was here recently. We've been using NDI in the cloud for quite a while now. The thing was that if you wanted to peer 2 together, they had to be on the same in the same data center, and there were some tricks that you could do to get them to go peering and things like that. But basically, here's AWS Elemental Media Connect, and what you're seeing here is if we go into one of the flows here, I've got this one set up to bring in an SRT caller, so that way they don't have to open up the port on their side. I opened up the port on this side, and then you have this output here where you can now say NDI output and what protocol that you want it to flow with. So I've got it working. It's pretty cool to see that AWS has jumped into this foray, because before what would happen if you brought it in over SRT, if you brought something into Media Connect and then shot it over, it was an NDI. So you had to use another protocol, and they had their own protocol for a while, CDI, which never really took off as far as popularity. So it's cool though to see AWS, just pushing the listening to feedback and pushing things down into the future. This is where it's all going.
Yeah. Carl?
Yeah, I think with the launch of like NDI Bridge, because NDI itself works on a local area network, but NDI Bridge allowed that to traverse, to another network across essentially the internet. So with the launch of NDI Bridge, it did expand NDI's capability for many different types of users. There are other products out there that do the same thing. The ATEM Mini itself does it, of course, with the ATEM Streaming Bridge. But NDI Bridge is a much more elegant solution if you're doing it all in software based. So if you're all in just inside the box, all in software based, it does make a much more elegant solution, especially for things outside of production, maybe industrial cameras. So if you're running an oil refinery and you have like 400 cameras looking at all different valves on site just to make sure everything you can actually visually see if something's wrong, then that makes a lot of sense that a control center somewhere else in the world using something like an enterprise version of NDI Bridge can bring those streams all back to a control center somewhere on the other side of the country, rather than them all having to be wired through some large local area network on site.
Jeffrey?
For me, I've been using NDI since they first announced it publicly, and I use it, and I'm using it right now. I mean, my camera is going to the computer via NDI and then out to you guys. So I've used it in many different ways. Plus, with the announcement at NAB of Hive PTZ Optics Hive software going into public, are out of beta into public release, and Bird Dog's software where you can do lots more remote, being able to remote via NDI easier and better is only going to be an advantage for them. Plus, didn't they just come out with a brand new TriCaster that they're really trying to sell? So having NDI in the cloud is definitely going to help with any remote for that as well.
Yeah, and Taylor?
The only reason why I brought this up is it just seems like when I first started with office hours, to do cloud production seemed a lot more difficult than what it is now. So I feel like all the tools are just kind of catching up. I mean, obviously we're cutting this show in the cloud, but with VisVector, if anybody wants to mess with VisVector, there's an image out there on AWS. You can spin it up on your own account, but it just seems like all the tools are all of a sudden catching up. Everybody is, now starting to make their products available in the cloud. It's easier to use in the cloud, all that type of stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I tell you, I'm so on the fence. Guy, you'd be interested to hear that I got pulled into an event, one of Blue's events. I needed to do which was all remote. Blue mostly does events out of the studio that they have in Charleston, South Carolina, and so generally has people coming there. But there was a need. He was out of town, and there was a need to do this 3-day event where everyone was remote. I was like, that's great. That's what we do. And the thought crossed my mind about, do I just kind of spin something up and make it work, or do I use all this legacy gear sitting behind me? We call it the legacy studio, which is not, it's not old by anything.
The vintage studio.
The vintage. Do you know what's funny too? That's right. But what we had was I've got a 2ME switcher in the rack sitting out on the other side of the wall, and then we brought in another rack that I had, which has got a Constellation 4ME in it. And so we had all this gear, and then a bunch of computers and things, and look, the show went really well. And I was using some NDI as well because I needed to get some. I was using Zoom tiles to get some gallery views back into a green room type stage environment, and it all worked well. There was a couple of times with NDI that it just was a little bit upset, and I was just thinking, gee, with like the Cloudflex, the thing that Jonas has got now, like, man, it's a pretty exciting time. And Guy, I know that you've kind of been tracking this stuff for some time now, where it's like now with that type of event and the events that we've worked on together, I think we're like, so I guess the question to you guys, if we were doing that same type of thing again, we were using vMix, and which was perfectly fine. I think even in the time now, we probably would look at maybe Vector or maybe Carbonite Code or something.
Yeah, I'm actually interested in that TriCaster S that Jeffrey Powers was just alluding to. I downloaded the 30-day trial, and I was just like, man, I should just install this over my Vector instance as well, just to play with it in the cloud. I mean, it is, there's a perpetual license available for $2,400, so you could just have it forever. It was supposed to come in at $100 a month, but so far what I'm seeing is a 12-month for, I think it was $1,500. So hopefully Lenny could let us maybe spin up another instance and try the TriCaster S, because for this type of production, or the type of production that we worked on, this right now is running on a 4X. So when I say 4X, for those that don't know what that is, it's an AWS instance. Normally we would have 3 instances, so where NDI would send the video across all 3. So one that would be a contribution instance. One would be our cutting instance, and the other one would be an encoding or something that would send the video back out. So that's three places for NDI to go across, and 3 machines and 3 times the cost. So if you're doing a 7-day event, costs really radically add up. With a TriCaster S, if you don't need more than 8 inputs, then so that's the lack of why the price is so cheap compared to vectors, is you don't have nearly as many inputs. But today on this show, we are using vector with the native Zoom integration, and we are sending out the encode from the same machine. So this is one machine, no NDI needed. So as far as all the stuff the knowledge that we had, to do this peering, and it's in the manual. So if you download that vector instance in the setup PDF, it tells you how to open up those ports for the 5,000 ports. That's the port numbers to be able to send from one instance to another instance, because if you don't open up those security ports, then they won't flow. So you need NDI to flow. And that was always part of the learning experience of like, okay, I'm sending it, how come I'm not getting anything? So to take all that out and just be able to make this easy, and I'm excited for what Jonas and crew, Michael Lang and Tucker and the gang are coming up with Cloudflex. That's my pick, so I'll save it for just, I'll show more here in just a second.
Very good. Taylor, is it true we've got no NDI, even the feed coming back into Zoom? Is that in the integration, or is that an NDI?
No, there is no NDI for this whatsoever right now. It is completely, and as I say that, my computer's being interesting here.
Is it the computer, or the
right,
fact that you're trying to talk and switch at the same time?
I'm trying to talk and click buttons, I guess. Anyway,
yeah.
No, but there's no NDI at all. So with the Zoom integration that we're using, everything is on one instance right now for the show. There is no,
Interesting.
no contributing at all whatsoever. The other thing I want to say in regards to Cloudflex is I'm actually using Jonas's Cloudflex for this show, and our technical directors have been testing it for him. And I will say, for those of you who haven't checked it out yet, be sure you do, because I think it will be helpful to a lot of people.
Yeah. Cool. So is there the Zoom integration in the TriCaster Mini S yet? Do we know? Or is it only Vector?
The only one I know it for is Vector. I don't know. Guy, do you know if the integration is available?
I'm pretty sure it's there. I thought that I read something that it's on there, because I don't see why it wouldn't. I mean, that's kind of the exciting part about it. Yeah, I'd be shocked if it wasn't already there. I need to re-download it, because that's the thing, is the update. It was just like within the last week that this occurred. My license ran out, so, because they only give you a 30-day trial. Which, can you guys make that 60 days if you're listening? Because we need a little more time to play with it.
A bit of extra time.
He makes it 60 days.
That's right. Mickey was saying about my hardware behind me. It requires regular replacements of the vacuum tubes, and they need 2 hours for it to fully warm up. That's right. It does take time, a lot of power, and I've got and the lava lamp. Exactly.
But it's got a really warm sound to it, doesn't it?
That's right. Exactly. All the best stuff has tubes. Exactly. All right. So now we're just into recommendations from the panel. So, Guy, we can continue on that theme. So, Cloudflex, yeah.
Yeah, so I'm really excited to see what goes down at NAB with these guys showing their new product out. Because what happens a lot of the times, if you don't want to go through getting these instances and dealing with all the learning experience, because just the ask, because when you want a GPU, you have to ask for it. AWS doesn't just hand it out right out the gate. So one of the barriers to entry is, even if you want to run this trial of Vector is you have to ask, and then you have to wait, and you have to get granted permission. Whereas with Cloudflex, you just say, hey, give me a Vector instance, and they just say, here you go, and it's on their infrastructure, or you can bring your own infrastructure. So it's either or, you put in your token. But there's an announcement with John Barker from Here to Record. So on the YouTube Here to Record channel, Jonas and John Barker go through some of their NAB plans of where they're going to be, but scrubbing through this, they talk about spinning up the different instances with the different permissions. Oh, and I get a nice ad on there because I'm not signed in. But yeah, Cloudflex, watch that video on the Here to Record site, and you'll see what I'm talking about as far as the permissions and being able to have users with granularity have timeouts. If you only need a TD on a production for a weekend, you can say after this weekend that permission goes away. So there's a lot of sophistication there that they built in, and I'm sure they'll add more, but him and Jonas and Michael Lang were running into the same thing over and over again, where they were having TDs that they would use and other graphics people and show callers and other positions where they just needed them for a 3-day event, 4-day event, and then they don't want to have access to that vector or that Carbonite code instant. And that's the other one, is Carbonite code. So they're talking about working with all the different manufacturers to get these licenses to where you don't have to spend the it's 14 grand for Carbonite code. Like if you only do a couple, shows a year, why buy the whole thing for 14 grand? It's just rent it with these guys. So I'm excited to see what all they announce and how they'll be in the Purple Tally booth on the show floor. So if you look at Purple Tally on the show map my show, you'll see where they're at.
And one thing that I wasn't sure of after watching that, there was also there was Here to Record, but there was also another stream that Jonas did
on LinkedIn.
That I saw
with
too.
Michael Lang.
Yeah, on LinkedIn. Yeah, that's right. Yeah. It's on YouTube as well. I found it somewhere, but there it was there. But the thing that I wasn't sure about was the idea of it actually not just controlling the instance once it was created, but also creating the instance. Is that part of that, to say, I want this type of instance even with Vector, and away it goes and creates it? Or was that still more the access control?
Yeah, I think it goes both ways. One is, do you want to spin up everything from scratch, and that way it would take still 18 minutes, because I know how it works on the back end. There's scripts that build these things, so it would still take 18 minutes to build out a vMix one from scratch. But what they have is pre-made instances already licensed. You're not typing in a license. You can use their license, so it's already in there, which that's kind of scary for some of these, because like Vector handles the licensing through a server on the back end that just goes out and authorizes it, versus vMix, you actually have the license that anybody who's borrowing it could go in there and say, copy, paste, and go open it up on somewhere else. I'm curious as to how they're going to handle all these different applications with licensing. So it's exciting times, though. I mean, because the heavy iron that we're replacing, you think about a Grass Valley, especially if you can plug in a board. So that's the other part of that LinkedIn/YouTube video that Michael Lang's in, where they talk about Stream Deck control, because I've worked on these shows and done enough productions with Jonas to know how he does the Stream Deck connection, which is with a VPN through pre-tunnel. So it'll be interesting to see how they build that out. And he talks about it vaguely in that session, but that's something like where Splashtop, you have USB redirect. I don't know if they're going to do that, because with TriCasters, you could just plug in a panel via USB, and how does it control, how does it know that, that instance is in Virginia, you're in Australia, how does it know to grab onto that and
tunnel that through?
Yeah, so it's exciting. I mean, again, if you could rent that panel locally and control, because I'm looking at a Carbonite black panel, and it's used $5,000 on eBay. So, I mean, that's $5,000 just for the panel, then $14,000 for the software. So in it, $19,000. I mean, it's a chunk of change.
Yeah, it is. It is. All right, Karl, what's your recommendation?
So my recommendation is something that's a little bit older. It's actually special features from I guess, 2 trilogies. So these are not the actual trilogies. You can watch the movies themselves, I guess. But I'm talking about as special features, which I believe this particular special features is longer than the movies. And so this is, of course, the Lord of the Rings, Middle Earth. So we're talking both Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit. But there's these things with the extended edition releases on DVD, Blu-ray, 4K Blu-ray, pretty much any disc format. There's these things called the appendices. And there's 12 of them. Each of them go for around 2.5, 3 hours each. So you're looking at around 5 hours per movie. So the movie's 3.5 hours, let's say. The appendices is about 5 hours per movie. So you're looking at around 30 hours total. But if you're interested in filmmaking and filmmaking production, this is like, this is a golden standard, because you get to see like what nearly most positions on a film set will do. So what a first AD does, what a camera AD does, what a camera assistant does, what a production AD does, the person who has to corral all the extras who don't have talking parts, but they have to have costumes. So you get to see that in great detail on these appendices. And as I said, there are 2 appendices per movie. So the Fellowship of the Ring will have 2 appendices, and then so on and so forth, right down to the Battle of the Five Armies, which is the final Hobbit film. But it also talks about how The Hobbit was different. People forget that Peter Jackson sued the studio between Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit because of the rights were different. So there was a lot of law. They didn't really put this too much into the Hobbit behind the scenes, but there was court cases that were actually finally settled before Peter Jackson could start making The Hobbit itself. The Hobbit was meant to be 2 films because it is a shorter story. It's a more basic story. It's a more linear story, so it doesn't have multiple threads going on at the same time. And the studio essentially said, we want to make 3. So during production, they split it into 3 movies, not just 2. But yeah, The Hobbit is a little bit different to Lord of the Rings. Lord of the Rings is a bit more sophisticated story. Plus, Lord of the Rings was, of course, all shot on film, whereas The Hobbit was shot with red cameras, stereo, so 2 red cameras side by side, shot at 48 frames a second. People may remember the 48 frames a second exhibition when it went into theaters. They haven't ever released it in 48 frames a second on any release. There's no release of 48 frames a second, even though that we were hoping that when the 4K Blu-rays came out, they would do that, because 4K Blu-ray does support 48 frames a second and TVs support 48 frames. So essentially, any 4K TV and any 4K Blu-ray player can support that format, but they still haven't released it in that format yet. It will happen. I have a feeling there will be the 48 frames a second, which is quite amazing, especially for the battle scenes. People kind of poo-pooed it back in the day. It's actually really good. If you watch the battle scenes, it's very smooth. 48 frames isn't too, but it's just different. People just went, oh, this is different. Of course, Gemini Man was 120 frames a second with Will Smith, so with Ang Lee. But anyway, so these 12 essentially documentaries, they go through every aspect, right up to, because these came out, especially the appendices right at the end, came out long after the film had come out. So there were some integral cast members who had passed away in that time. So they were able to do some documentaries on these cast members, or essentially crew members, I should say, who were very integral. So the cinematographer for all 6, he passed away a few years after The Hobbit had come out. So they were able to put this documentary in there about him. And this is also true at the end of Return of the King. There was a fan who passed away, and then the song that won the Academy Award was written for the fan, and that documentary is in there as well. So there's a lot of really cool documentaries that are kind of tangential to the actual filmmaking as well, to people who worked on the film, that are in this. But as I said, it's around 30 hours total of that's just the appendices.
How was it released? It was released as a part of the special edition.
Yeah, so it was released on the DVD extended edition. Right. That was where it's first released, and the DVD extended edition came out 1 year after the theatrical release. So essentially, the extended edition came out for let's say Fellowship, which was the first movie. The extended edition came out in December, so the following year, when Two Towers came out. The theatrical release came out 6 months after the movie. So during essentially the American summer, they released a theatrical version on DVD, which had its own set of special features, which are pretty standard, maybe an hour's worth. And then the extended edition came out with 4 discs, 2 discs for the movie and 2 discs extended for the special features. And this is the appendices across those. There are also, for both trilogies, there are multiple commentaries for each movie as well. So I won't go into the commentaries, but there's an actor's commentary, there's a design commentary, there's the director, cinematographer commentary, there's a producer's commentary. So there's I think 3 or 4 different commentaries per movie. So you can end up watching the movie, which I have done over the last decade, of course, well, 2 decades now. You end up watching the movie multiple times, and you get to hear like Christopher Lee, who's no longer with us now, but Christopher Lee actually talking about his role in Lord of the Rings, but then he also just veers off and said, I just did Star Wars with George Lucas as well. He's talking about Star Wars for a little while during a Lord of the Rings commentary. So, and we don't have Christopher Lee to ask these questions anymore, but he talks about these things, and he's more thematic stuff that he's talking about. Christopher Lee is, of course, the only actor who had a personal relationship with Tolkien, of course. So having the Christopher Lee one there is really important. And then we have Christopher Tolkien as well. So Christopher Tolkien was still alive when the films came out. So this is Tolkien's son, who kind of essentially owns the property during when these films were being made. And we have interviews with him too. So it's pretty amazing. But yeah, if you're interested in Tolkien, or if you're interested in filmmaking in general, especially in filmmaking on film, so where you actually have blue screens, we don't have blue screens anymore because we use green screens now. There's a whole digital thing for that. And then if you take a look at the red cameras that we used, well, that were made and used for The Hobbit, and how that production was a little bit different. Because it was shot in 3D with stereo cameras for every shot. So yeah, you actually do get to see these kind of behind the scenes productions. How in The Hobbit they split the production between North Island and South Island of New Zealand. So Peter Jackson was the director of the film on the North Island, and Andy Serkis, who played Gollum, he was a director on the South Island. So they could divide and conquer and get the film made faster and more efficiently. But Andy Serkis, essentially, he was a director for anything on the South Island. Technically, he would be considered an assistant, AD on the actual, or second unit director, but really he was the director for everything shot on the South Island. So you find out all this kind of stuff in these really extended special features, which are really cool.
Wow. Well, my feeling is I think the Lord of the Rings, the Hobbits are great, but I don't fully dive into the story. That sort of fantasy is not necessarily my bent, but I will watch every second of any of the behind the scenes. And same with Star Wars. Actually, Star Wars is the same. Where I'm like, I'm not dissing Star Wars. It's just not quite my bent. But I watch all the things that I can watch on the behind the scenes. I really enjoy it, and commentaries and things. I would watch a movie I've never seen, and just watch the commentary on some of those because I find it fascinating. So anyway, that's a good pick. I'm having a look to see what I can see if I can.
You
generally
pick it up. You can maybe find it online. Technically you may be able to find it online. I don't know if any of the streaming services will be Warner Brothers, I believe, that owns the property. So, but as far as I'm aware, it's a disc-only thing. So you can buy the box sets and stuff, and you can buy them secondhand, of course. But you may find them elsewhere on the internet, of course.
Of course. All right. We've given plenty of time for Jeffrey to think of a recommendation. What have you got?
Well, if I'm going to get that box set, I'm going to have to get a DVD player. So we'll start with that. No, I got a 1-2 punch here, which we'll go over here and see it. And, oh, hey, have you seen my action figure?
Why are there 2 coffee cups?
It was supposed to be a water bottle and a coffee cup, but this is the new ChatGPT. Now that they've gotten rid of Dolly and incorporated into ChatGPT, we've been playing. People were making action figures and Funko Pop, people and everything like that, and just the accuracy. So what I did was you take your photo, and I took my logo, and it did a pretty good job in both. A little bit of tweaking to it, but yeah, that was a lot of fun. But that's not what I really wanted to show. The 1-2 punch that I've been working on was the 2 things. First of all, the Director 1 came out this last 2-3 weeks ago, and I think you can see that in that picture. Maybe I don't have that framed up right, but it's to the right, upper right. I was doing some video. I posted a video about Pianoverse, which is an IK multimedia software to create better grand pianos for your DAWs. But so I was using this and for being a backpack streamer, as I call it, being able to have stuff that you can put into your backpack to stream stream. Like for instance, at CES, I did the Director Mini and a couple cameras, and we were able to do 2-person shot with Super Source and everything right at the booth. And I went booth to booth to booth and had some great stuff right there. So the Director 1 is just this. It's the newer version. It's a bigger version. It's an AMOLED screen, 7 inches, with 800 nits. It can bring in 3 NDI sources, and the best part about this, as opposed to the Director Mini, is you can bring in the 3 NDI sources and you can make multiple scenes on it. With the Mini, I could only bring in 3 NDI sources, and if I tried to create a scene using those 3 NDI sources, it said that you maxed everything out. It's got a little bit more to it. They added the HDMI out cable because they were doing USB-C HDMI out, but now they have this so that you can actually bring in a touch screen and put this in the side and then use the touch screen to do all the control. You don't even need to touch the unit or have a touch screen, because then they have a remote software that's on iOS or Android, which allows one person to switch the show, another person to bring in the graphics. There's an on-screen telestrator that you can turn on. That might actually, the telestrator, you might actually need to touch the screen for that, but you can pull down. I was recording stuff, and I could pull it right down to my phone or right onto my computer and upload graphics and then push it out to there. So there's a lot of stuff that the Director 1 could do that the Mini still does, but with that bigger screen. It's just really amazing. And the other thing that I was playing with is OBSBot came out with the Tail 2. Both of these items I actually had before they came out, and yeah, they did send me these to review, but I've been having a lot of fun with this one because the OBSBot OBSBot Tail 2 is smaller than the average PTZ, so it's something I can actually put into my backpack, which is just crazy. And it's got a 12x zoom, hybrid zoom, and I was at an event on Friday. We had surf bands playing, and I was hooked up to a Blackmagic board, and I was running through SDI. Hooked up to battery. The thing has like a 4-hour battery, and it can stream right out from the camera, so you don't even need to bring a computer with you. The OBSBot remote that came with the Tail R2s also can work on this, so there's a lot of different ways that you can connect up to this thing, and it just came out, so it's just there's still a lot of extra stuff that needs to go on, firmware updates and everything, to really make it a solid player in the game when it comes to the lower end YouTube creator type a studio like I have.
Good ones. Well done.
Thank you.
Then Taylor, you get to do a little recommendation today.
Yeah, so I'm gonna actually sneak in 2 things here. One, for those of you who are wondering what I've been clicking, I'm going to show you. Let me go back to me because it muted everybody when I took it. But yeah, that's what I was looking at behind the scenes. So, and I'm mouse clicking the show, by the way. I'm not using a Stream Deck or anything fancy. I'm mouse clicking this whole thing, which it doesn't bother me, but everybody else thinks I'm crazy. But oh well. Anyway, my content recommendation I have, and I actually stumbled upon this on YouTube. It's called NBCU Academy, and I'm posting a link in the chat. It gives you kind of a sneak peek behind the scenes of news and general production at TD. They kind of have some interesting videos out there, especially if you, you haven't been in the business or haven't really seen kind of the behind the scenes of this type of stuff. It's quite interesting to watch. I mean, even if you have been, just kind of seeing it from their perspective or how they made the video is interesting too. So that's
have you got a particular video that you liked? Because I can see there's hundreds of videos there.
No, I do not. Honestly, I haven't watched them all, so I couldn't tell you.
No,
I
fair
just
enough. Just
stumbled
500
across
or
it the other
something,
day. So
Yeah, it's cool.
I like the free
cool.
grief support video. I'm gonna have to watch that one. And then how to
so-
interview. That would be another one.
The channel had a different name from, it used to be a HR channel for NBC for onboarding people, but it looks like they've just turned it into like a broad university style, which is pretty cool. But yeah, I remember this was used for onboarding. So I remember seeing some of these videos. It just popped up in my stream. You know me, I'm just, the nerd looking at this kind of stuff. And these things just got recommended in my YouTube stream. I went, oh, well, that's interesting. Then I noticed that a lot of the videos are essentially HR onboarding videos. And there's some production videos like how to roll a cable, how to, stuff like that. But it is pretty cool. But they have been around for quite a while now.
Fair enough. I'm trying to remember what the name of. That's right. Mine is unrelated to all of this, and just some comic relief, and that's Last One Laughing. Last One Laughing on Prime is it's just it almost feels like Big Brother, but it's just a 6 hours. I don't know how many, 8 comics or something, and they have to make each other laugh, and so they go out if they smile or laugh. And it is a great show. It's hilarious. It's a UK, out of the UK, and I have enjoyed watching that. There were 6 episodes, and I'm sure it's going to be a thing because it seems to be kind of blowing up everywhere. That people have really enjoyed it. So it'll probably start seeing it in different countries, but very simple concept of having funny people in a room and no one's allowed to laugh. So
I'm guessing that's PG rated.
I enjoy it. It is more. I think it's M.
Because the Australian version, this which has been going for a few years, is definitely not PG rated.
Yeah, that's right.
Out of Queensland. Yeah.
Right. Okay. Yeah.
Does that matter anymore?
Yeah. Seriously, I'm surprised how things have changed a lot with the language and stuff.
I see a lot of Australian shows on Hulu now, and of course other countries on like Max, or they're just trying to buy them up as quick as possible.
Yeah,
so
we made way too many
of this
seasons
stuff
of Blue Heelers. So
yeah,
if you see a country practice and Blue Heelers, just turn away.
They're old. Yeah. Very good. Well, thank you, everyone. And thank you, Taylor, for double duty. You get paid double today. Well done. And to Robert and Alan, Peter, the whole gang that have been making things happen in the background, and the 50 or so people that have been watching online, thank you. Thank you for spending your time with us, chatting along. And I will see any of you who might be at NAB. I think there's a couple of things like 1F Jeff has got a dinner happening. I think I'm trying to get along to that, and we're going to try to do the show from somewhere as well next week. So next week will be an interesting extra hours, but hopefully it'll be content rich as we're talking about the things that we've seen. So we'll see what happens. Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.